Awesome stuff. 2 minutes, not 5 minutes. Mari, you want to go next?
Yes.
You guys can hear, hey? Awesome stuff, because the speaker's in front of us.
Yeah, and I should add that they do a brilliant job in advocacy and lobbying. So my name is Mari Sukers. I'm part of the ACDP, the African Christian Democratic Party. ACDP was founded right at the birth of our democracy and formed part of the very first democratic parliament, and we're still standing as an organization that contends, fights, and has a vision for a Christian democracy in South Africa and for transformation of the African continent based on the biblical worldview. I think as an organization, we have certainly made a permanent mark in the South African political environment as the first Christian political party in the country. There's a number of significant contributions that we've made, both in legislation and a number of achievements or victories to fight for the biblical worldview where policy and legislation is concerned. I serve on the portfolio committees of social development, health, and basic education. We currently have a representation of 4 public representatives, and I would say if we look over the last term, that we certainly, and the 30 years, we have a very strong, credible, hard work ethic, and some of the most respected members of parliament in the National Assembly, and one of them are here. So
that's Maury.
Yeah, so I am not a lawyer. All of them has got legal background here. So I'm going to, I think how I would frame the Bela Bill and the discussion around it is to speak about the process of the bill, where the bill currently is. And one of the things that I just need to say, this has been a long, arduous fight against the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. And like you said, Vaughan, when you look at it at the face of it, at the legislation, you would say, what is the big fuss about? And I think all of the, like Liesel has spoken about the toolkit for early childhood development centers, and it is currently being piloted in 5 provinces, we should also add, and the consultations that she mentioned as well, we need to question how many people were involved in those consultations. So the reason I'm saying I'm not a lawyer is because I am highly political. So I would look at the political process and how things are done and what is the implication. 1, when people do not know. 2, when the process is not done effectively. And underlying what Liesel has also said is what is being presented, what is the ideology that is underneath it, and what is the worldview that is being entrenched into our culture. So we need to look at the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill within that framework. The bill came before the National Assembly last year, and we went through a 10-month, it was really like a speedy process. And the reason why it was rushed in that way is because we are just before the elections, of course, on the 29th of May. And it is very clear that this legislation is one of the key priorities of the current governing party to pass before the 29th of May. And why? And how do we, now constitutionally, I think Steve is going to speak a lot about process as well as the technical aspects of legislation as it goes through the houses. But when it comes to legislation coming or lawmaking process, it starts within the committees. The bill gets tabled and it gets sent to the committee, and the committee sits with the legislation. So when I say we dealt with it for a 10-month period, that is the public hearing process of the Bela Bill. And when we started the process on the Bela Bill, I should say, one of the key things that we wanted to do was to engage with as many of our constituencies so that they and raise awareness around the Bela Bill. So I said, what is the cell? What is it that we say we want to achieve, or that the governing party say they want to achieve with the Bela Bill? The way South Africans received this bill, or how it was communicated, is this Bela Bill is going to transform basic education. And everybody wants justice, and justice is access to education, it's having equality and having the opportunity and not being discriminated against. That is our path. And when the governing party, and I would say, am I allowed to be political here?
Yes.
Okay. So when
You could even be controversial.
because a politician asking, may I be political? Yeah, it's a constant irony.
Too nice.
Yeah. But so what is the sell to people when you look at our past, the fractured past of South Africa? And I'm speaking as a person, as a black person in South Africa. One of the key things in 1994 when we went to go and vote was that we wanted to be treated equally. We wanted equal opportunity in a just society. And that is a very strong value for us, right? So what the African National Congress does very well and has been an absolute seller in South Africa for 30 years is where we come from and how we want to transform our society. And the Bela Bill has been exactly that, sold like that to the people of South Africa. So in every public hearing you had people thinking, never reading the bill, never looking at the implication of the bill, because the education around the bill has been so poor. So when legislation has not been properly explained, when the lawmaking process is taking place, by the way, a key tenet of our constitution is that the lawmaking process is not one-sided. It is Parliament that deals with the bill, and then they need to go to the people. It's a participatory democracy. The public then needs to give the inputs into the bill. So that's the process and the cell, as I say. So the cell has to do what is the belief, what is the ideology that underpins the legislation, right? And then how do they take it to the public? So we started with it, like I said, in last year, and it's the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. This bill has been in draft for a period of 10 years, I think, Christopher, for a period of 10 years, and in 2013 and in 2017 it was open for public comment. So you can see how long it is. In between that, in the 10 years, there's many things that has happened. You had COVID, you have the onset of online schools, you had all of that. Now, when you say you're going to transform or reform the education environment, you would think that everything that has happened in the last 10 years would then be considered when you go into a legislation like that. But it never did. So we have two aspects. It's either we are incompetently or dysfunctionally looking at legislation, or second, that actually we are not interested in better quality education, we are more interested in a specific agenda. That's a political statement. But so when we look at I want to read to people, I just need to quickly go back to what Liesel has spoken of the toolkit. It is important to understand it's not only the social cohesion unit. The Bela Bill is not separate. It is all of these, the legislation, the policy, the guidelines. These are all part of the framework, the policy direction that the department is taking. And it's also important for people to understand your government is in essence then saying to you what is important for them, how they want to govern or transform education, right? Very important in light of what she has said. The redefining of cultural norms, traditions, values, all of that. So when you look at that, in terms of the social cohesion unit, we have the Bela Bill that we're dealing with now, that is before the National Council of Provinces. This is the NCOP. And then we have the guidelines on what is it's a long word, on SOGI-YISC. Liesel is very familiar with this. It is sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics. Both the Bela Bill and the SOGI's guidelines was brought before the committee within this last portion of the term, right? So people need to have that just as a picture of where we're going with this. The social cohesion unit made a presentation during the period that we dealt with the bill. And it was very clear, this is what is being given or expressed, is that it's about human rights. It's about human rights. It's about enhancing and fighting for human rights. When you look at the words that they use is words like, and I'm talking about the SOGI's sexual orientation guidelines, is the word ally, for instance. And anybody who's not an ally, how do you treat them? Okay. So I think I'm putting that together to say that we've got the guidelines, we have the Bela Bill, and then there's another document that I want to add. It is the learner pregnancy policy that was passed in 2021 in December, right? All of these things have one thing in common. It's within the education environment. And who are the most important stakeholders in that environment? It is the parents and the communities that are being served. Now I'm going to read to people just very quickly what is before, if I have an opportunity, I can speak about the other implications of the bill. But when you look at the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill and the intention of the bill, it says it is to amend the South African Schools Act of 1996, to insert and amend certain definitions, and to provide that attendance of grade R is compulsory. I'm just going to quickly stop at that. When we say we're going to make grade R compulsory, on who does that have an impact? On our ECD sector, right? So how does in the government's eye, how does the reform and transformation of education look like? That's the question we should ask. How does it look like? Clearly, it looks this way. We will take ECD and we will make it part of the primary school system, right? And that has implications, obviously, for the independent education ECD sector. And remember, ECD is the largest sector that within our township economy. It's women-owned. It is mainly black-owned and black-managed. So what happens when government takes over a function that is part of a free enterprise? You call it nationalization. I don't have enough time to go into all of it, but so that's the one. Then the second is to amend the penalty provision in the case where the parent of a learner or any other person without just cause prevent a learner who is subject to compulsory attendance from attending school. So what we are saying is, if you don't take your child to school, you will be penalized. I don't know if Christopher would be able to speak, because they've actually done a great job of giving a research document to the committee on this very aspect. What is government saying? Now remember who the government is that's speaking. It is a government that says that we have liberated, we are pro-poor, we have a pro-poor agenda. It's the same government that's actually saying, if you don't take your child to school, you will go to jail for a period of a year. All right? So who are we talking to? Who are the people most affected by absenteeism in schools? It is the poor. It is the marginalized. It's people that for various social reasons cannot send their children to school. And I should say that in terms of that, the ACDP absolutely rejected we rejected the bill in its entirety, but in terms of, and I hope Christopher speaks a little bit about the research that they've done in terms of does it actually work to put parents in jail, and what is the implication? Remember now, we're talking about parental rights. If you take a parent and you take a parent to jail, is it in the best interest of the child? How does the child's wellness gets affected by you putting a parent into jail? In a South Africa, where we have an unemployment rate that's almost close to 40%, where most people are living below half of South Africa, 18 million of them are living on grants, right? So we know that for most parents, the reality of hunger is real. The reality of mental depression is real. The reality of violence is real. So when children stay out of school, these factors are at the core of it. So we say we will send them there. We don't have enough time for me to go, but I think I'm following Liesel's example of just to just give a definition of what the intention is and in what environment it happens. Then it says, and it says it will actually take people to jail who disrupt school. I laughed at this because somebody sent me a message while we were busy with the bill to say, can you ask them if they would take the taxi drivers who disrupted school for a period of 2 weeks if they are putting them in jail? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. They wouldn't do it. Why? It's politically not expedient for them to do it. Here is the parts that I want people to pay attention that I think you spoke about gender affirming care and earlier with us. It says that this one has to do with school governing bodies more than anything. It is to enhance the authority of the head of the department in relation to the admission of a learner to a public school after consulting with the governing body of the school, to provide that the governing body of a public school must submit the admission and language policies of the public school to the head of the department. What does it mean? You give government more control. The whole Bela Bill is about giving government more control. Then it says to provide for that's a good thing for South African Sign Language. But here is what I want to underline. I'm not going to take the whole intention. This is what it says. To provide the minister with the authority to appoint a person, an organization or a group of persons to advise on curriculum, assessment-related matters, to provide that the code of conduct of a public school must take into account the diverse cultural beliefs, religious observances, and medical circumstances of learners at the school, and to provide for the inclusion of an exemption clause in the code of conduct and for disciplinary proceedings to be dealt with in an appropriate manner. Why are we having that there? That is the question we should also ask. Medical treatment, code of the uniform of the school. I'll end off with this one to underline again. We also had the Human Rights Commission coming to us to do a submission on learner uniforms, the uniform of learners. I, in my constituency, cannot get the Human Rights Commission to come out to a farm where people don't have water. They are coming out to do a committee presentation on learner uniform. Why is learner uniform so important? Because, obviously, we know there's a case now, Beaumont School, where if a learner identifies a certain gender, that learner must be treated, dressed in that gender. So what is the Bela Bill? The Bela Bill is more of the same policies and legislation to undermine parental rights and restrict and limit the freedoms of people to decide on the education of their children.